The statistical science article by Doron Whitsam, Eliyahu Rips, and Yoav Rosenberg, they submit the research results. What they had done is there is a standard document that lists prominent rabbis in Israel. They took the 34 most prominent, prominence being defined by column inches in this critical biography. They took the 34 names of the rabbis, they took their dates of birth and death, and had the computer search for them. The names of the rabbis and their date of birth and date of death were all found encrypted in the Torah. Blew them away. They submit their article for review to statistical science. The reviewers say, gee, that's still possible, kind of strange. What they ask is for 32 more, the next 32 most prominent. So they take those and their dates, birth and death, shoot them in. Every one of them is found. So they accepted the thing for publication after 6 years of analysis of all of this. Now there's some people that tried to run the same test, didn't get quite the right results because they did it sloppily. They didn't do it precisely well enough. There's other people, in fact, the head of the National Security Agency got involved, as I recall. Dr. Harold Gans got involved. They submitted some additional ones, including the places of birth and death and so forth. Oh, and they also put in a whole bunch of wrong dates. All that was screened out. Only the right stuff showed up, and they had even better results than the first time. It was estimated the first 34 was like one chance in 775 million that it could have been by accident. What they also find, as this goes on, are what are known as the Holocaust codes. In Deuteronomy 10, you find Hitler, Auschwitz, and the Holocaust. Deuteronomy 31, the Holocaust, crematorium for my sons. In Poland, find plagues, the Fuhrer, Eichmann, king of the Nazis. 31, the Holocaust, crematorium for my Hitler, Mein Kampf. In Poland, there's the Hebrew intervals are found, and there's the verses they're found in. Is that coincidence? Is that accidental? Some people argue that it is. Some skeptics, and by the way, there's some very bright, good guys that are skeptical of all of this. They took War and Peace in English and searched it and found the names of 13 people that had been assassinated. Yitzhak Rabin, Gandhi, 13 famous people. And they argued, not that there's anything special about War and Peace, is that in any large body of text, if you search hard enough, you can find names. But they missed the point. It's not just the names, it's the relevance to the past, the clustering, the relative. Now, some big guns started to take a look at this. Dr. Harold Gans, first of all, you need to know something about the National Security Agency. That's probably, of the 7 major intelligence agencies in this country, the NSA is the largest. It used to stand, the initials used to stand for no such agency. Nowadays it stands for not secret anymore. In Fort Meade, Maryland. They were a customer of mine in a number of my previous roles. Dr. Harold Gans was the senior mathematician for the National Security, and the resources of Fort Meade are staggering. They have more of the biggest and best of anything you can imagine in support of their mission. But he heard about all this, and he decided to check it out for himself. So he programmed his own computer at home to analyze this. His computations took 440 hours of running, 19 days straight. And when he saw the final result, he was staggered. He believes that there's less than 1 chance in 62,500 that this could have happened by chance. All 8 referees and Dr. Gans have retired from their previous roles and are now teaching the Torah in synagogues around the world. So they're believers in the codes. Now, the exploitation begins. Michael Drosnin, who's not a believer, self-confessed atheist, wrote a book called The Bible Code, which deals with all this background. In the book, he gives you the impression that he was a collaborator with Rips and Whitsam, both of whom have denounced him. He's a name dropper and an exploiter. He claims in his book that the Bible predicts Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. In the passage he uses in Deuteronomy 4, his translations are contrived. Mathematics is spurious. He's not a believer. This book has been attacked successfully, I believe, from both sides. People who are in favor of the codes attack him because he misses the whole point, and his book, they feel, does more harm than good. The people who don't believe in the codes, if you pick up a book against the Bible codes, they're attacking Drosnin's book not necessarily the codes, because that takes more mathematical sophistication than most people bring to the table. So the point is, the Bible code book that's making all the news is a straw man, easy to knock down from either side. It's fortunate in the sense it stirred up a lot of interest. It's unfortunate because it's generated a lot of misunderstandings. Now, Jeffrey Satinover he has a book called Cracking the Bible Code that is much more competent. He has a deep background in Judaism, and he also is a very sophisticated scientist. And his book is much more to the point, although he sees it all through what I would consider the blinders of Judaism and of Talmudic Judaism. John Weldon has written a book, Decoding the Bible Code, Can We Trust the Message? John Weldon writes some fabulous apologetic books, a very competent guy. Again, his book primarily is effective at debunking Drosnin's book. He takes a number of statements that I would enjoy debating with him on the codes in general. The Jewish community in Israel discovers the codes, the articles go, and all the world is buzzing about the Torah codes, right? And a guy by the name of Yaakov Ramsel, a Messianic Jew in San Antonio, Texas, says, hey guys, you're looking for names, how about the name Yeshua? You suppose it's there somewhere? And of course, it turns out that the name Yeshua is encrypted behind almost every Messianic prophecy in the Bible. Well, now this debate takes a three-way swing. There's the pro-codes, the anti-codes, but the Jews who are pro-codes are not too excited about the idea of Yeshua being in there. And Ramsel is a neat guy, good friend. He's the guy that sends me a lot of stuff. That's where I got the acrostics for Esther and some of that stuff. And Grant Jeffries and he became good friends, and Grant Jeffrey published a book called The Signature of God, in which he takes up the support and the defense of the Bible codes. He also helps Yaakov Ramsel publish a book called Yeshua, and a sequel volume called Jesus is My Name. I'll come back to that. And Grant Jeffrey wrote not only The Signature of God, he's written a recent book called The Handwriting of God. And both of us hope to have our books. He's doing another book proving the codes are real. And I'll hope to have our book. Both of us are planning to make our books debut in the summer at the CBA and whatever. So we'll see what comes of that. Kind of interesting, Grant tells how when this all started, Yeshua codes, he'd get a call from Israel, all upset. Well, Yeshua just means salvation. And Grant would say, now wait a minute. When you found Hitler, you recognized that as a name. Because I understand your problem, but it's your problem. Now, you should understand the rebuttal to Yeshua is that Yeshua consists of 4 letters, and 2 of them are the most frequent letters in the Hebrew alphabet. If you study Yeshua in the Old Testament, not just the Torah, the Old Testament, in just looking at intervals of less than 100, it shows up over 5,538 times in the Old Testament. I've done this myself. And 2,919 going forward. And that includes 136 with no intervals. That is the name just spelled, Yeshua. And then 2619 going backwards. So it's very, very common. But I don't see that as a surprise. Jesus himself said, the volume of the book is written of me. I'm not surprised to find his name that frequently. Jesus challenges, search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life. And they are they which testify of what? Me. Yeah, there I am. Here is a list of the frequency tables in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. And obviously the Vav and the Yot and the Vav are the 2 most frequent letters, and the He are the 2 most frequent letters in the scripture. The cynics will say, well, this whole thing is just a statistical accident. Well, let's take a look at the Yeshua codes. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the creation encrypted as Yeshua is able. In Genesis 3:27, Adam and Eve are covered, by the coats of skins in chapter 3. Behind that you have encrypted Yoshaya, he will save. Remember they put on aprons of fig leaves? But then God covered them with skins of animals, teaching them that by the shedding of innocent blood they'd be covered. And behind that text you've got encrypted Yoshaya, he will save. Ruth, which the whole book communicates the kinsman redeemer, Boaz and all that. It opens with a 5-interval sequence, Yeshua. Daniel 9, the 70 weeks, has a 26-letter interval encryption of Yeshua behind it. But that's just the starters, gang. You ready for this? Let's go to Isaiah 53. That was Yaakov Ramsel's first discovery. Here's the high point of the Old Testament. Of all the passages in the Old Testament that deals with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, you've got Isaiah 53. Encrypted in that is Yeshua Shmi. Yeshua is my name. That's pretty impressive. Stand by. You have Yeshua is my name, his signature, Messiah, Nazarene, Galilee, Shiloh, Pharisee, Levites, both high priests, Caiaphas and Annas, Passover, the man Herod, wicked Caesar perish. And that evil Roman city, let him be crucified, Moriah, cross, pierced, from the atonement lamb, bread, wine, Obed, Jesse, David's line, of course, seed, water, Jonah, on it goes. Each of these having, you could preach a sermon about any one of these in its linkage to Isaiah 53. You say, that's pretty impressive? Stand by. Here's a list of the disciples. Disciples that mourn: Peter, Matthew, John, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, and 2 Jameses. Not 1, 2. There were 2 Jameses, right? Okay. And you've got Simon, Thaddeus, Matthias, 3 Marys, Salome, and Joseph. Now, it's interesting that one of these Marys and John and Yeshua are all linked together sharing the same yod. Remember where Jesus looks down at John and consigns Mary? It's interesting. Obviously all by statistical accident. 40 names in 15 sentences, encrypted. They're clustered, relevant. It's the clustering, it's not just the names, the clustering and the relevance that is the profound aspect of this. People say it's a statistical accident. I want you to examine this paragraph on the screen. There's something hidden in this paragraph, and I want to see if you can find it. The paragraph says, upon this basis, I'm going to show you how a bunch of bright young folks did find a champion. A man with boys and girls of his own. A man of so dominating and happy an individuality that youth is drawn to him as is a fly to a sugar bowl. It is a story about a small town. It is not a gossipy yarn, nor is it a dry, monotonous account, full of such customary fill-ins as romantic moonlight casting murky shadows down a long, winding country road. And it goes on. Here's a paragraph that has something about it that's weird. Something about this paragraph, if you examine it carefully, should bother you. There's a paragraph without a single E in it. There's not an E there. Now, the letter E is the most frequent letter in the English language. And that's what Samuel Morse, in making his Morse code, made the dot, the one dot, an E. It's the most frequent letter, it's the shortest thing. The whole Morse code was his attempt to make it frequency sensitive. The most frequent letters are the shortest. The least frequent are the longest in his Morse code. Well, E's occur in English about 13% of the time. You say, well, that's just a statistic. Okay. Try writing a sentence without using an E. It ain't easy. Now, you could probably do it. He did it. In fact, he did more than that. The question you want to think about, what's the chance of that paragraph that you just read happening by accident? Pretty unlikely. In fact, what if I told you that paragraph came from a 267-page novel called Gatsby, a story of 50,000 words without using the letter E. It was published in 1939 by Ernest Vincent Wright. And in order to pull this off, he could not use any past tense, no EDs, couldn't use she, he, they, we, her. You start thinking about the words that he had to abandon, the list gets very onerous. He actually had to tie down the E of his typewriter to avoid it happening by accident. He could not use any number which, if spelled, had an E in it. It's a self-imposed task. He decided to try, and he did, and it's obviously just a literary curiosity. But it demonstrates something, that trying to violate the basic statistical behavior of language is not easy. And those violations are a contradiction to chance. They're an evidence of effort. The absence of E in a full novel is phenomenal. The absence of E in a paragraph itself is something what you went home and tried to do, you would really have to work at it. It's not something that happens by accident. What's the chance of 40 people who are at the foot of the cross being encrypted behind the text of the crucifixion as prophesied in the book of Isaiah, 8 centuries before Christ was born? Come on. David Kashdan, the chairman of the Department of Mathematics at Harvard, says the phenomenon